Her name was Mia, 23. A girl with sunshine hair and a laugh that filled rooms, at least that's what people thought. She had the kind of beauty that turned heads and the kind of presence that made strangers smile, even if just for a second. She was always the one they asked for photos, the one they tagged in summer memories and birthday dinners. But no one asked what happened after the camera flashed. Because when the lights dimmed and the heels came off, she would sit on the edge of her bed, unclasp her necklace, and stare into silence. There was always silence after applause. And it was in that silence that Mia felt the most lost. She didn't know how to say, "I feel like I'm performing my own life." She didn't know how to ask, "Is it okay if I'm not okay right now?" And so she smiled for them, and forgot how to smile for herself. Mia's days were full, but not fulfilling. Fitness class in the morning, editing photos for brands by noon, calls with clients, emails, meetings with marketing teams who called her radiant and on brand. But no one ever asked about her poetry. Yes, poetry. The thing she did at 2 a.m. when the world was quiet and her hands remembered how to tremble. She'd write verses on napkins, on receipts, on the back of sponsored products she'd never used. It was her secret rebellion, her breath beneath the performance. But she kept it hidden, 'cause she believed beauty had to be effortless, and pain unspeakable. Till one day she found a message from her younger self, buried in an old notebook under her bed, stained with tears and dreams, written in ink that had nearly faded. "One day you will choose you. I hope you remember what that feels like." And for the first time in years, Mia didn't post it, didn't filter it, didn't perform it. She just read it and wept. Healing doesn't happen like a movie. It happens when you unfollow people who don't see you. When you sit alone in a cafe and let yourself eat slowly, not for content, but for peace. It happens when you write a caption and delete it. When you take a selfie and don't post it. When you look in the mirror and say, "You're still here." Mia started small. She wrote a poem on her bathroom mirror with lipstick. She turned off notifications for a day. Then 3. She bought a journal that wasn't aesthetic, just honest. And then one night she turned off her phone entirely and turned herself back on. Mia signed up for a spoken word night. Didn't tell anyone. She wore jeans, no makeup, a hoodie that once belonged to someone who broke her heart, but this time it felt like armor. Her name was called. She walked up, not to impress, but to feel. Her voice cracked. Her hands trembled. Her knees shook. But when she spoke the last line, "I am not your muse. I am my own miracle," the room went still. And then thunderous applause. But this time it wasn't for the girl in the photo. It was for the woman in the poem. Weeks passed. Then months. Mia started publishing her poems. She said no more often. She chose silence over fake laughter. She lost followers, but gained her voice. She moved into a small apartment with sunlight and imperfect walls. She started growing lavender on the windowsill. She called her mom just to say, "I love you." And when people asked what she did, she no longer said influencer. She said writer. And when they asked what kind, she said, "The kind that bleeds and blooms on the same page." One morning, barefoot, coffee in hand, poem in mind, Mia opened the window. And she smiled. Not for the camera. Not for them. But for her. And it wasn't performative. It was sacred. 'Cause she remembered the sound of her own breath. The taste of her own freedom. The girl who once smiled for everyone else had finally come home to herself. Mia began waking up before the alarm. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. There was something magical about early morning silence, the kind of quiet that didn't demand anything. It welcomed her. Like an old friend. She wrote with the sunrise now. Not for deadlines. Not for likes. Just for the simple, sacred act of letting her soul breathe. One morning, her friend Olivia called. "You disappeared," she laughed gently. Mia smiled, voice calm. I reappeared. Just where I was supposed to be. Olivia was quiet. Then whispered, "God, I miss myself too." That conversation sparked something in Mia. She realized this wasn't just about her anymore. Her healing, her honesty, had become a mirror. A permission slip for others to come back to themselves. So she wrote about that. And she didn't stop. 6 months later, Mia was invited to speak at a small creative retreat in the mountains. Just 15 women. Writers, artists, mothers, wanderers. She stood barefoot beneath hanging lights, trees whispering overhead, and read a poem she wrote the night before. It was raw. About losing herself in curated perfection. About dancing in kitchens again. About choosing slow mornings over fast fame. By the last line, women were crying. Not because it was sad, but because it was true. One woman, gray curls, ocean eyes, hugged Mia and said, "You reminded me that I'm not too late for my own life." And Mia knew. This was her new success. Not attention, but connection. Not applause, but resonance. Mia began writing letters she never planned to send. To the ex who loved her beauty but not her brokenness. To the girls who ghosted her the moment she said, "I'm not okay." To the version of herself who thought healing meant being strong all the time. And one day to her father, who had left when she was 7. She wrote, "You didn't stay. But I did. And I'm finally learning how to love the girl you left behind." She folded the letter, burned it in a fire pit on a full moon night, watched the flames eat the pain, and set her free. Autumn arrived. Mia was invited to a high-profile event, the kind of thing that once defined her. She almost said no. But something in her whispered, "You don't have to go back. But you can walk in differently." So she went. No stylist. No brand deal. No publicist. She wore a simple black dress, her curls wild, eyes soft. And when she walked in, she didn't scan the room to measure her worth. She walked in knowing her worth had nothing to do with being seen. A photographer snapped her photo. She smiled, only when she meant it. Later, that photo went viral. Not because she looked perfect, but because she looked free. She met him at a used bookstore. He was holding a book of Rumi poems. Their conversation started with literature, drifted into silence, and rested there, comfortable. He didn't know who she was online. Didn't ask for her handle. Didn't try to impress. They shared coffee. They talked about the ocean. He asked, "What do you love most these days?" And she didn't flinch. Didn't shrink. She looked him in the eyes and said, "Waking up and feeling whole, even when I'm alone." And he smiled. Not at her beauty, but at her being. Mia rented a tiny studio space in the city. One window, one desk, one plant, a single record player. On the door, she hung a sign. "Come as you are." She hosted small circles. Women reading to each other. Healing in community. Not networking. Not performing. Just showing up. One night, a girl barely 18 stood up, voice shaking, and read her first poem aloud. Afterward, she turned to Mia and said, "I thought I had to be fixed before I could be found. But now I know I was never broken. Just hidden." Mia smiled. Because that girl, she had once been her. Years passed. Mia's poetry found its way into books, classrooms, even subways. Not because she hustled, but because she healed. One of her pieces was printed on a billboard in the city. She stopped chasing love when she realized her light was not a lighthouse. but the ocean. People stopped to read it. Some took photos. Others cried. But Mia? She just kept walking. 'Cause she no longer needed to be witnessed to believe she mattered. She was already whole. Already home. Already herself. One evening, Mia stood on her balcony. Older now. Softer. Wilder. She held a cup of tea and whispered aloud. I remember her. The girl I used to be. And in the breeze, she swore she heard a whisper back. Thank you for not giving up on me. She didn't reply. She just closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the light fill her bones. Not for the camera, not for applause, but because she had become the very thing she was always chasing. Free. She wasn't the girl who smiled for the world anymore. She was the woman who smiled for her soul. And that, perhaps, is the most beautiful kind of becoming.